Welcome to Universal Man. My name is Mark Kweppett, and I'm here to help you sharpen your masculine edge. And in this video, what I'm going to be talking about is the difference between toxic femininity versus toxic masculinity. So welcome back. I thought that this would be a fun video to kind of really kick off this new direction of the channel and give people, I think, an idea of where this concept that I'm going to be pursuing in this channel really plugs into the world, how it can affect the way we interact with each other, how things from just personal interaction up to social interaction to political interaction all kind of have these elements of sexuality present in them. You hear this idea of toxic masculinity talked about a lot, but I don't think you hear a really clear understanding of what that is. At least no definitions that I've heard have been really convincing. And then you also don't hear about the flip side of it too much either, which would be the toxic feminine, as it were. So that's really what I want to get into unpacking, or at least starting the conversation about today. I don't claim to know everything. These are my thoughts, obviously. And they're constantly being refined. So this is where I'm currently at. I would love to have this conversation with you. Here it is broken down kind of in a nutshell. Toxic masculinity, I see it as essentially unhealthy competition. You can think of it as competition that makes the society, the person, the general social sphere of that competition overall worse, less healthy, less thriving, that sort of thing. On the other side, the toxic feminine is more about imbalanced compassion, compassion to the point where it becomes enabling of bad things, which in turn, brings down that general health of, whatever it's involved in. Now, I can already hear some of the comments. Why is masculinity associated with competition, and why is femininity associated with compassion? Can't men be compassionate and women be competitive? Yes, obviously. But the reason why the associations in this way is because testosterone has been pretty much proven. Testosterone and other elements of the masculine nature have been biologically proven to increase competitiveness, the search for dominance and that sort of thing. And then on the flip side, it's pretty clear that femininity and the hormonal profile of women and even their brain structures and things like that are more associated with being in tune with another person's suffering, being in tune with the pain of the other person. And again, doesn't mean that one can't, men can't be compassionate, women can't be competitive. It's just that, tendency-wise, there is a weight on either end. So let's get started by looking at toxic masculinity a little bit here, since this project is devoted to masculinity in general. Pretty much that toxic masculine element is when the competition piece, it hurts us. It hurts you, the person involved, and it hurts the people around you. And in terms of a social sense, this is the bully. This is the person who tries to dominate others in a way that leads to everyone's everyone gets brought down by it. And maybe the bully gets propped up for a little bit, but if you're engaging in that sort of kind of cutthroat competition constantly, then you're eventually probably going to be brought down by that competition yourself. Historically, if you kind of magnify toxic masculinity and you look at it in terms of what kind of society it creates, well, it creates one of a very rigid social hierarchy where the people at the top have kind of this stranglehold over the people at the bottom. So you can think like serfdom, slavery, oppression, even sort of like oppressive monarchies and things like that. The general attitude of toxic masculinity is, hey, I'm going to gun for the top and I'm going to put everyone else down around me. And if, you're down there, then sucks to be you. Learn how to get stronger. And you can see that there is elements of that could be helpful if it wasn't so extreme. Competition is necessary. Competition is one of the primary shaping elements of nature. It's what allows us to sharpen what is most good in us. It allows us to draw out the best of the best. That's what competition does, and it's why the most evolutionary theory is built around this idea of competition. The species that were successful, they progressed, and so we humans, we represent, whether we like it or not, the winners. Evolutionarily, your ancestors all won in a sense, and there's plenty of people who just lost. And so, competition is necessary, and capitalism and the success of capitalism, opposed to other forms of government, has been shown that when it's done in a balanced, healthy way, it's really, really great. So let's flip it and look at toxic femininity now. So toxic femininity is really all about that over compassionate to the point of irrationality mentality, where you are so in tune with another person's suffering that you kind of lose all ability to rationally and in a detached way analyze that situation. And this is the product of many of those neurochemical, emotional elements that are present in a woman's nurturing instinct. And it doesn't, and people think that when you're talking about this nurturing instinct, you're always talking about this soft, cuddly sort of thing, and women get ticked about that, rightfully so, because, women can have, some serious aggression as well. And that's actually often where it comes from, is from this nurturing instinct. You guys got to think of it more like that, the angry mama bear energy. The problem with toxic femininity is that it kind of claims children all around. They look at anyone oppressed, anyone they decide is going to be their baby that they're going to protect. They kind of protect that thing viscerally. And sometimes maybe that shouldn't be, what happens. Maybe they shouldn't be trying to protect that person so much, because maybe that person needs to learn from their mistakes. That would be where the competition would have value. In social terms, this would be the enabler. This is the person that allows bad things to happen, and maybe even empowers people to do bad things because they're so compassionate. So this would be the person who is unable to be firm with maybe someone in their family who's like a drug addict. They're the person who just keeps giving them money, keeps forgiving them, basically just applies no pressure on that person to change and better themselves. In political terms, this is kind of represented by Marxism, communism, that sort of thing. This idea that the people at the bottom, they're totally innocent and good in all regards, and they need to be given everything, that they deserve everything. Now, that was really big, a number of years ago. I mean, it's still obviously around, that whole idea, but what's really big now is the idea of more social Marxism. And this is where this concept of intersectionality or intersectional feminism comes in, where you talk about how you almost create a new hierarchy of who is the most oppressed, and whoever is the most oppressed, they deserve more of that mama bear energy. They deserve to be fought for and given more privileges and acceptance and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like, if you are a transsexual black woman, you deserve more social enablement than a straight white male like myself. Now, obviously, there is a lot of value in compassion. I think it's an absolutely necessary thing. But when you take stuff too far and you make it so blanketed and irrational, it creates a situation where things don't work. And I mean, that's been pretty much proven repeatedly by communism. Any country that's tried to make communism work has failed horribly in a lot of ways, sometimes leading to millions and millions of deaths. But, obviously, the constant war of monarchy and that sort of thing wasn't too great either. So the real problem, like the worst situation, is when the toxic femininity and toxic masculinity combine, and then you just have pure toxicity. And the way they nest into each other, it seems to me that they kind of show up a little bit differently. So when you have a toxically masculine person, So someone who is so hyper competitive, but then they get toxic feminine ideas in their head, it gets real scary real quick. So that would be the person who's kind of like a genetic supremacist. They believe in competition of the races, but then they get to the point of thinking that, wow, me purifying or maybe exterminating the Jews, that's actually a gift to the world. That's a gift to those vermin Jews. And that's horrifying, right? That's absolutely terrifying. But they're actually then adding compassion, or their perception of compassion, to that twisted competition. But then when you flip it and you nest toxic masculinity inside of toxic femininity, it gets equally as terrifying. And this is when communism got really, really bad. You had people beginning to compete over who was going to be the biggest champion of the people. And by that meaning that they were going to be the ones who killed anyone who got in the way of communism. So you can check out something like Gulag Archipelago to see how horrible that becomes. It's leads to many deaths and that sort of thing. And then in more contemporary terms, this is it shows up kind of two ways. You have the Victimhood Olympics, where you have people competing over who is most oppressed. They begin to compete over who deserves the most entitlement, essentially, who is the most virtuous because they are the most oppressed. And if you're not particularly part of one of those groups, then you can still get in on the fun by competing over who's the biggest champion of those groups. Now, where we want to be, obviously, is we want to be at a place where we've got balanced elements of both competition, the good parts of competition, and then the good parts of compassion. And what I see this as is, I think I even might have done a video on this a couple years ago. It's been so long since I've done videos, it's hard for me to remember, but you need a balance between justice, which is, in a sense, competition, and mercy. You need to have a balance of, responsibility, of, dealing with cause and effect, but then also recognizing that, hey, sometimes some of us are disadvantaged, sometimes things happen, and we need a little help, we need a little forgiveness. And we need a balance of these things. We need both of them, for sure. But the thing I see getting in the way of this the most is that people are addicted to the high. And you can get so high off of both of these sides. The toxic feminine gets addicted to this self-righteous kind of mama bear energy, where they just want to, be their little champion and, virtue signal how much better they are than these uncompassionate people over here. But then on the flip side, on that, the more masculine side, you've got the high of being a tough guy, the high of feeling like, okay, well, I'm hard, I'm tough. Why can't they get with it too? Why do they think they deserve all these handouts and things like that? And so each side, they get a sense of status, they get a sense of power by putting the other side down, and that actually creates a neurochemical boost. It feels good, and this is what fuels this outrage culture that has created such, in many ways, disgusting partisanship within the United States, and it's seeming to be in the world at large in many ways. So if we're going to have any sort of solution, any sort of real forward progress, I think it's going to come from authentic conversation. And in order to do that, it takes humility. It takes humility to acknowledge that, hey, I'm biased. I've got my own perspectives on things, and I need to actually engage in a real conversation with the other person where I'm not trying to just put them down and put myself up, but I'm instead trying to understand that person. And hopefully, if you find yourself firmly entrenched in one side of this political discussion, maybe this video helped you see that, all right, there's some rationality in that other side, and I can see how maybe they got hooked into taking things maybe a little too far. And maybe if we can both come to the table with, this kind of understanding of the other's perspective, we can get to this point where we have a real conversation where we talk about, where do we draw this line between justice and mercy? Because I think that that's something that's fluid. It's not an absolute. I think many of the solutions that are going to serve this world the best, they're going to be always in a transition. We're always going to be in a transition. So stop searching for absolutes. I think absolutes are useful in a philosophical sense to begin your thought process, but at some point, especially when you're working with other people, it's got to become a conversation. And yeah, you got to understand each other and understand yourself too in order to really have that conversation amount to anything. So anyway, these are my thoughts. Hope you guys find it at least useful. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. You can head on over to universalman.com. I don't really have my full website up and built yet, but I'm gathering email addresses. I don't trust YouTube. I don't want to be reliant on YouTube. I want to be able to have a direct relationship with you guys. So if you sign up with on the newsletter, then I can make sure that no matter what YouTube does or doesn't do, I can still reach you guys. So head on over there, sign up, and otherwise, like, subscribe, and stay sharp until next time.